Hello everyone, Lunch here, and this is my Mechikabura decklist and guide. I'm going to go through the deck first, and then I'll have a small section on how you want to open the game with this deck, because it's got a pretty specific play pattern you want to try and aim for. I think this deck is really underrated right now. I don't see many people talking about it, and I think it's one of the strongest decks in the new set, possibly even Tier 1. That'll take a little bit more testing, but it's definitely very strong. The amount of cards you can draw is just insane. Once you flip over, every time you Dark Overwhelm, you draw a card and put 3 battle cards back from your warp to your drop. And notably, that is not once per turn. So if you're Dark Overwhelming twice with Wormhole, you actually draw 2 off your leader and put 3 cards back each time. The amount of card you draw on this deck is just insane. You draw 4 to 5 cards a turn, and you just get to keep all your cards because they're Dark Overwhelms, not regular Overwhelms. Another thing that's really strong about this leader is on the front side, your draw is not tied to attacking, so you can go first and still do your Burst True, Take a Life, search your top 5. It's just very strong in general. I very much like this deck. I was playing it at my locals. It was doing very well. I'm just going to go ahead and go through the leader first. So on the front side, once per turn, Burst 2, add 1 card from your life to your hand, look at top 5, add a Demon Realm Race or Demon God to your hand, then shuffle. The Awaken is at 5 life, it's a draw 2 and you burst 1. So this will help you by turn 2, you'll always be able to get 5 cards in the discard, which is what you need for your Dark Overwhelms. Once you're flipped, I already went over every time you Dark Overwhelm, you draw a card and place 3 back. You can do that basically twice per turn because of Wormhole. And then you have an active main once per turn. During this turn, the next time you Dark Overwhelm, it's reduced by 1 black. A couple things to note with this. 1, all the Dark Overwhelms you play cost 1 black, so they're free. So you basically get a free Dark Overwhelm once per turn. The other thing to note is a lot of the older Dark Overwhelms have generic energy costs, and those don't work with these. It has to be a black pip in the cost. To start off with, I'm going to start with our two 1-drops. We're playing 4 of each. The important one is Row Blue. This is a 1-drop on play draw card, and if you have 2 or more energy, you just have Wormhole. So it's super easy to get Wormhole in this deck. That's kind of the whole engine. Row Blue is just a 1-drop that replaces us, that just has it automatically. Usually you want this to be your turn 1 play. If you know your opponent can remove it on their turn 1, maybe hold it back. It kind of depends. The other 1-drop we have is Dark King Mechikabura, Final Battle at Hand. This is an older card. It's not from this set. I prefer this card just because of a few things. We're never going to use this Activate Main skill. This is for a different deck, and there's not really a reason to do it much. However, it does have Overlord, which we do have a Servant in this deck, so if you're going for game, it can draw you an extra card. When it's played, you draw a card, and if you want, you can send the top 2 cards from your deck to your warp. This is sometimes useful. Our leader can only put back battle cards, so if, say, you mill 2 extra cards or something for the start of your turn, you can play this and try and generate some battle cards so you can start using your leader skill. Also, if you're not worried about decking out, you can do this to try and hit your secret rare, which is our Evil Mass Saiyan card, because you can summon it from the warp. It's pretty incidental. Maybe you'll do it occasionally. Mostly you just play it to draw a card and because it's a search target. We also play 2 Koitsukais. This is a pretty aggressive deck, so we're going to have a bunch of tools in here to help us facilitate that so we don't get floodgated. Koitsukai is one of those, plus you're milling a bunch, so it's always easy to have it. I'm using Vegeta for our super combo. In theory, you could also play a super combo that is a searchable target for your leader. However, we're only really searching the 2 times with our leader on the front side, so I find Vegeta more useful. We're going to play 2 Frigid Blast Poutines. This is another older card that's kind of a tech card of my choice. This is the only Dark Overwhelm in the game that's free. So if you're ever in a situation in like turn 2 or turn 3 where you really don't want to tap out but you want to get that second Dark Overwhelm, you can use this to do it, to trigger your leader and trigger other cards. When you play it, you can search a Demigro 4 or less from your deck and add it to your hand, and it's a 10k. So it's a lower attacker, but you do play a searchable Demigro, so it is still a +1 when you play it. The important thing is it's a Dark Overwhelm that doesn't cost any energy. For Demon God Poutine Scheming, this is the most important Dark Overwhelm we play. It's a Dark Overwhelm for 4, 1 black. If your leader is Mechikabura, draw a card. And then limit 1, when another battle card is Dark Overwhelm, draw a card. For all intents and purposes, this is draw 2 cards. We're always going to be Dark Overwhelming a second time, and if your opponent leaves this on the board, then you're just going to start drawing cards over and over again. This is a promo from the recent, I believe, the anniversary box? Yep, that's right. So, Demon God, Poutine, and Gravy. Once again, Overwhelm 4 for a black pip. Limit 1, when played, draw 2 cards, discard 1. Limit 1, when this card attacks, place one of your Z energy in the drop, select an opponent's battle card, 6 or less, and send it to its owner's warp. This is a really nice target because not only does it filter through your deck, it also allows you to warp cards, and it's especially good against other black decks and things that play lower curves. It's really good against Kidku, things like that. And the removal is recurring, so if they don't get rid of the card, you get to keep removing your opponent's cards. Also, it's draw cards. That's all we're trying to do in this deck for the most part, is just draw a crap ton of cards. Demigura Encroaching Shadow. So this is our search target for Frigid Blast Poutine. It's a Wormhole 4. It has Wormhole itself, and when you play it, you draw a card. So this is going to be an option if we can't get Roblu. We can instead have our first Overwhelm Demigura, we draw a card, and then we can do our second Overwhelm because it has Wormhole on it. It's also important because it's a Poutine target, so it keeps Poutine as a +1. A lot of times, this is honestly just going to be our second Overwhelm because it draws a card, and if you can get this plus Roblu on the field, plus Poutine on like your second turn, it's going to be really hard for your opponent to remove all of that, and you're just going to have more advantage going into the next turn. 2 Cooler, Strongest Pride. This is just a removal piece. When you play it you can play it for 1, and it warps a battle card, gives something 5k for the turn. It's just here for more removal. 2 Demon God Shroom Scheming. This is another Dark Overwhelm 4 for 1 black. It has dual attack, and when it attacks, you can take a black battle card with 15k combo bar from your warp, combo it with its skill negated. Importantly, you get to do that on both attacks. So if you need to generate Z energy, or if your opponent hasn't floodgated you, this is really strong as our second Overwhelm for the turn. 4 Supreme Kai of Time, and Prison Godly Spirit. This card is really key to the deck. You have 2 ways to bring Dark Overwhelms from the warp into play with their non-keyword skills negated. This is one of the best targets for that. It's also one of the best cards to just summon as your second Dark Overwhelm. It has Barrier, Servant, and Blocker, so essentially it's a 30k barrier blocker. At the end of your turn, switch this card to active mode. So not only is it large barrier blocker, it also switches to active at the end of your turn. So you get to attack with it the turn you play it, it'll switch to active, and essentially for the rest of your game, because it has Servant, you can either attack with it or block with it. It's up to you, because it doesn't untap at the start of your turn because of Servant. That being said, if you can stack a couple of these out, it gets really hard for your opponent to get anything through. So this is something I just try and play as much as I can. Demon God Toa Scheming. I play 2 of these. It's a double striker. It's our double strike Overwhelm. Overwhelm 5 for 1 black. When it's played, you can place 2 of your black battle cards from your warp into the drop, and then warp one of your opponent's battle cards. So this is removal. Also, more importantly, it's a double striker. We can play with our free play cards, same as Supreme Kai of Time, and you'll get to keep double strike because it's a keyword skill. I play 2 Goku and Vegeta. This is just a counterplay that's removal. It's really strong against certain decks and not great against others, so I have it in here as a 2 of. I do side the other 2, and it's one of the first things that comes in or out depending on what the matchup is. 2 Bardock Destiny Changing Warrior. So this is a new card. It's actually good for any black deck. Counterattack limit 1. If your leader is black, negate the attack and play this card. And then if your life is at 4 or less and you have 5 or more cards in your drop, you can activate the skill for free by sending all cards in your drop to the warp instead of paying the energy cost. Essentially, it's a free negate that you're only really going to be able to do on certain circumstances. That being said, it's very strong late in the game. You do have to be careful, though, because once you remove your whole discard pile with this, you do have to establish, 4 or 5 cards back there again in order to start doing your Dark Overwhelms. So you might want to be careful when you use this. It's usually kind of a last resort thing on, like, the last turn of the game. 1 Mass Stand, Brainwash More. This is just a card where you can pitch it from your hand and pay it black. You take a life, and then your opponents, if they can't damage you for that attack, so it stops double and triple strikes and things like that. 3 Golden Cooler, Golden Fighting Spirit. So this is an 8-drop. It costs 3. If your leader is black, place 2 black battle cards from your drop in the warp, then play from your hand. So when it's played, first of all, you can warp one of your opponent's cards, ignoring barrier, which is really important. It's the barrier removal for this deck. And then once you've played it, your opponent can't attack with cards other than their leader unless they warp a card from their hand every time. So later in the game, if you get to that and you haven't already beaten your opponent, you might be playing this in order to remove things with barrier, or if you need to floodgate your opponent, since black doesn't have natural floodgates. This is also especially crippling if you can play this with a couple of the Supreme Kai of Times on the field. It's really hard because then they have to get through your barrier blockers while warping cards from their hand. Just very annoying and hard to get through. 3 Dark King Mechikabura, Call to Duty. So this is from the new set. It's a double striker. It costs 2 to play, and you have to have 3 or more energy. When it's played, you choose one of your opponent's battle cards and send it to the warp. When it's played, you can play 1 battle card, energy costs 5 or less, and Overwhelm or Dark Overwhelm from your warp with its non-keyword skills negated. So that's what I mean with playing things from your warp. The 2 targets you're going to want to get are Toa, because you need to keep double strike, or Supreme Kai of Time, because you get to keep your barrier servant blocker. Either are good targets. Sometimes you'll just bring out a random card that's a 20 vanilla at that point too. Mostly it's here for the removal. For our secret, we're playing Evil Saiyan Malice Made Flesh. This is just the best black secret rare, and since we're going to be milling, we definitely want to play this. It's very strong. For extra cards, I'm playing a 2 Protector of the People, 2 Super Kamehameha. This is another one of those things where when we're being aggressive, we want to stop our opponent's floodgates. 2 Petrification. Petrification is just one of the best negates in the game. 2 Power Burst. We have plenty of 1-drops to grab with it. And 2 Supporting the Dark Empire, just the normal blocker negates. These 5 cards can be switched out in terms of numbers depending on what meta you're worried about. You just always want to make sure you have some Super Kamehamehas and some Petrifications, in my opinion, just because both of these cards can be kind of blowouts if you catch your opponent in the right situation. Next, we will go to the Z deck. So we have 2 Demigra's Wormhole, which I do want to talk about. So this is a 1 energy, 1 Z energy. If your leader is black, when this card is placed in the battle order or moved from the game, place up to 2 cards from the top of your deck into the owner's drop. That is actually the most important part about this card, because sometimes you'll find yourself with only like 3 cards in the discard pile and you want to overwhelm 4 or 5. You can just play a Demigra's Wormhole and mill the amount you need off the top of your deck. And more importantly, the second time you're a card or 2 short, if it's on the field, you can remove it for its effect and mill for free. It does have active main, limit 1. If your battle card with Dark Overwhelm skill is in play, you remove it from the game. Play up to 1 black battle card with energy cost 5 or less and Dark Overwhelm skill from your warp with its non-keyword skills negated. This is the same effect as the Mechikabura 5-drop. Basically, you're just playing extra cards. You want to get Poutine for the blocker, or you want to get Toa for the double strike. A lot of times you're going to wait to use this until you need your mill, or if your opponent isn't floodgating, you want to just extend a couple more attacks out. But usually you want to leave it on the board until you need it. You don't just want to burn it right away unless you have a reason. 2 Demigra Wormhole opened. This is important because it means we always have access to Wormhole in case we draw really bad or our opponent somehow manages to get rid of a bunch of our stuff. It also has a draw 2, mill 2, so you want to be careful because that's mandatory. And with the fact that we're wormholing in every turn, you can kind of cycle through your deck really fast with all the draw, so just be careful on that route. 1 Super Saiyan Vegito, Max of all Saiyans, Scion of Sparks, wrong one. Honestly, a lot of times, this is just going to be used to get rid of our Demigra when we don't want to mill anymore, but it also has a draw engine attached if you feel like you have extra energy and you want to draw more cards. Say you get floodgated later in the game, you have a bunch of energy and you don't know what to do with it. A lot of times you can just make this. The rest of it is just kind of generic one-ofs, just kind of standard things that you normally play in black decks. I do want to highlight Super Saiyan 4 Vegito Barrage is new in this set. So it's a 4 cost, 3 energy, deflect, triple attack. If you have a battle card with Overwhelm or Dark Overwhelm in play, reduce the energy cost of this card in your Z deck by 2. So basically it becomes a 2 cost, 3 Z energy, 30k triple attacker, which is really strong, especially later in the game. If you're running low on cards and your opponent's down to like 1 life or something, this is probably going to finish him off, just because 3 30k attacks is incredibly hard to defend against, and you're always going to have a Dark Overwhelm in play, so it's always going to cost 2. Alright, so now I'm going to go to the part of the video where I show you some of the plays of the deck. Hey everyone, this is the play portion where I'm going to go over some of the plays for the deck, since once again it's a deck with some very specific play patterns. I'm just going to go over them real quick. And what I want to do is just run through like the first 3 turns, because after that your plays are going to kind of vary a lot. But for the first turns, what you want to do is you want to have try and mulligan for one of your 1-drops, just to kind of get you going. Roblu is the best one to get. It's okay to play this on turn 1, assuming your opponent can't remove it. If your opponent can remove it, you might want to keep it because it's your easiest way to access Wormhole. The deck does have other ways to do it, but Roblu's the easiest. Either way, you just want to make sure you have a 1-drop to play just to kind of get your engine going. So let's say, here's our hand. So turn 1's nice and easy. The nice thing is your leader has a non-attacking draw. So you burst 2, so 1, 2. Then you take a life. And then we'll play our Roblu, draw a card. So now we have Wormhole. You're not going to overwhelm yet, though. You're going to wait until the next turn. Don't try to like combo off cards to get to your overwhelm. You want to be able to do it on your awaken turn. So next turn, opponent attacks you. Usually decks don't do any more than that. If they're doing something more complicated, then go ahead and check on, depending, you might want to keep your negates, things like that. So we go into turn 2, we draw a card. And then we are going to use our effect again. So we take a life. Burst 2, 1, 2, and we search top 5, which I technically didn't do last time, but it's fine, whatever. Grab our god. And then, so now we're on turn 2. Assuming you get attacked, then you'll always be able to awaken on turn 2. And what you want to do is awaken right now. So you have your 4. We awaken, flip over. Our awaken is burst 1, draw 2. So you won't get any energy for this. If you have your Roblu in play already, then you don't have to worry about getting Wormhole. If you don't have Roblu in play, you either need access to some Z energy, so you'll get the Z extra, or you can play for the 4-drop Demigra. Ideally, you'll have a Roblu, though. You could also play your Roblu this turn if you need to. Alright, so we've got our 5, and we wanted our first Overwhelm to be, where is it? Poutine. So the special thing about this deck is, first off, you can reduce the Overwhelm by 1, so Poutine is free. We'll do our Overwhelm, remove our cards. Now our leader says, whenever we Dark Overwhelm, we put 3 back, draw a card. So we put 3 back. Technically it's supposed to be battle cards, but it doesn't really matter in this instance. And then we draw a card. Poutine draws a card for being played, so we draw a card. We have our Wormhole still, but as you see, we only have 3 in our drop. A lot of times, you're going to want to attack here first and put a Z energy out. That way, you can spend 1, go into your Demigra's Wormhole, which mills 2 from the top of your deck. And now we have the 5 that we need in order to do our second Overwhelm. I personally like going for Supreme Kai of Time as my second Overwhelm on the first. It helps establish it out. It's got barrier, it's got blocker, it's just really sticky and hard to remove. So let's say we do that, because we got our 5. So that's removed. Our leader triggers again, because remember, it triggers every single time we Overwhelm, not just once per turn. Put 3 back, draw a card. And then Poutine triggers and draws us a card, because we Dark Overwhelmed a second time. So that's how like this deck just kind of massively generates advantage out of nowhere. Oh, we technically did spend our second energy on the Supreme Kai because we can only reduce it once per turn. If you really want to go nuts, you can activate Demigra's Wormhole and bring out one of your warped Dark Overwhelms as well. When you do that, you normally want to be getting either Demon God Toa for double strike, or another copy of Supreme Kai of Time for the Barrier Servant blocker. Keep in mind the non-keyword skills will be negated, so it won't stand up, and you won't get the removal for the other one. Now, if you don't want to be overwhelmed, or I'm sorry, if you don't want to be tapping out here because you're playing against another aggressive deck, you can always not play Dominguez Wormhole and just attack and combo with a card or two. It only takes one combo card to bring out any of the 4s. Supreme Kai of Time is a 5, but let's say you could just bring out, say, Demigra for 4. Combo 1 card, bring this out because you'll be at 4. Then this will draw a card and this will draw a card. So basically you're just trying to just accrue massive advantage every turn by gaining Wormhole, Poutine, draw, play a card, draw. You're drawing 5 cards if you have Poutine plus a drawing Dark Overwhelm. In addition, you get to keep all of it because it's Dark Overwhelms. So stuff really stacks up, and if your opponent can't remove all the cards... So for example, right now I have 3 cards out here. All these are going to do something next turn. These 2 both have Wormhole. So if they don't get rid of both of them, then I have access to Wormhole automatically. And even if they do, say, get rid of both of these, I have my extra draw here, so I'm going to get to draw 2 cards and try and get Wormhole another way. You also always have access to Wormhole in your Z deck, because, where'd it go? We have this Demigrid. Although you want to be really careful because it's mandatory to draw 2 mill 2 every time you do this, so you can mill yourself out if you're not careful. You can always replace it with this if you need to, just to get rid of the milling. Because once this deck mills its 5 cards, it just keeps cycling them back. You don't actually need to mill more cards. You're just putting them back with your leader, and then maybe putting 1 or 2 more cards, or using Demigra's Wormhole to mill. This mills up to 2 when it enters and leaves. So anytime you need 1 or 2 more cards, you can just play or get rid of your Demigra's Wormhole. So yeah, there's obviously bigger packages too. Like, for example, later in the game, you're probably going to be playing Mechikabura. You're going to be playing things like Golden Cooler. But this kind of first 2-3 turn setup is what you want to try and accomplish every single game in the early game. From there, just keep playing your Dark Overwhelms, keep drawing cards, and eventually you'll just out-advantage your opponent. All your stuff is 20k, so it's really annoying to get rid of. And once you start stacking things up and having multiple battle cards live every turn, you're really going to take it to your opponent.